Welcome. This is Dr. Liz Musel, and today we're going to talk about the various approaches to generating solutions to a problem. Again, we all have problems, and often we have to be, as a leader or a manager, faced with all kinds of business problems we have no previous experience in. And it's challenging enough to learn about managing and solving problems in your personal life, but again, it's a completely different adventure in this dynamic, fast-moving, technology-driven business environment that we're now working in. So when you can visualize a problem, you're a step closer to finding a solution to it. Using logical steps and critical thinking with a free-form approach is the key to creative thinking. So, as often we have to use innovation to solve problems because we are working with new technology tools where there isn't really a lot of precedence that can apply to you or your business. So modeling and visualing is one tactic that combines two approaches and allows your creativity to flow. It's always good to set a picture to your problem. So, one key that you always want to remember is visualizing your problem, creating visual communication. So that would be creating a model, a chart, a diagram, a picture, something that kind of gives a visual presentation of what's going on. When you have a graphic representation of a problem, it doesn't necessarily guide you, but it allows you to visually communicate and look at something from a different perspective, seeing the big picture, sharing your idea with others, establishing benchmarks for testing one solution against another, and being able to compare what seems to work best. Putting data into visual form, such as a diagram, chart, or model, allows you to more easily recognize clusters and patterns that form the data. This is important because clusters of data can point towards trends. And when you see or identify trends, you can start to make predictions based on what has previously occurred. Identifying and tracking trends allows you to forecast next steps because you can, with some accuracy, predict what's going to happen if you consider the internal and external influences. So let's start talking about finding patterns in data. Clustering is when a group of sets or objects, and in our case, data, that are similarly placed into categories. When you cluster objects or data, you can most clearly see relationships. So what you want to do is when you're facing a problem is look at the data in the problem and see if it can be categorized. And then go ahead and categorize it, whether you do it on a piece of paper, creating a little flow chart or little circles in your own type of model. It can allow you to begin to see patterns in the data. The concept of clustering is it plays a big role in data mining, which is a process where computer scientists gather and categorize large amounts of data and information into a structure that is comprehensible. And it allows statistics to be created in many fields. Many companies with a web presence, which pretty now is everybody in the United States and other outlying countries, for example, hire analysts to mine data about visitors to their website. And if they look at who's visiting their website, they can cater to that target market. The analysts run tools that place customers into categories that can help them better understand what their consumer buying habits are. Data clusters are the result of algorithms and other methods and ways of separating data into categories. You can make data clusters in everyday life too. In fact, most of us do with our subconscious mind. If we look at a bunch of data, we automatically start to categorize it or place it into different clumps and groups together. You can think about it as separating your laundry. You put the whites together, you put the colors together. It's that kind of flow that we do in regular life. When you go shopping, you start to go around the store and you have probably your own system of maybe you want to do the produce first, and then you want to go take a look at the frozen foods, and then you want to have the freshest items in your cart, and so on and so forth. So you might have your own methodology of following the way your groceries are categorized in the market. One downfall of clusters of data, if you've gone and you've seen patterns and you've created categories and you've recognized relationships between the data, it's not interpreted for you. It's just another strategy or building block to your solution. You want to be able to recognize patterns in data. Seeing a logical repetition that is consistent in your data allows you to see a pattern. A pattern can be a repetition of your images, numbers, behaviors, or words. For example, when I did my doctoral research and gathered data from my participants in my interview studies, I looked for repeating words and repeating ideas to gather themes and clusters of ideas that I would use to interpret my data of the results. Patterns are all around us in our daily life. Looking at traffic, looking at how our life is organized, time, everything. Reflecting to recognize patterns. Recognizing patterns is often a subconscious activity of your mind. Your mind just scans and sorts information logically just based on how you interpret and remember things. For example, when you read the newspaper or watch the news. You can reflect on some data by locating repeating words, creating a table or chart, or graphing clusters you have categorized. When you recognize patterns, you scan and recognize the most important details. You filter information, analyze it, and synthesize the results into something more meaningful. You create a strategy to solve a problem. A common pattern recognition exercise is to make a number table. A basic number table gives you the instances of each pattern in a chart. Web analysts use pattern recognition to gather information about the type of people visiting company websites and from where they came from. For example, if everybody's coming from Google and Yahoo, this would be an important fact to know. Data can be gathered about visitors and push that information into reports that reveal important statistics for the business marketing and owners. The spikes and valleys appear in these statistics are charted, and it represents patterns of behavior. Brainstorming processes. This is another strategy for finding solutions to problems. After you gather data, build diagrams and charts, and make models of your problem, the clusters and patterns you see may begin to direct you towards possible outcomes, solutions, or next steps. This is an awesome time to start using process generating ideas for solutions such as brainstorming. Brainstorming is something you're probably already familiar of. You just go ahead and you write down everything that comes into your mind, logical or not. So to familiarize yourself again, here's some steps for getting down as many ideas as possible, and then how you're going to interpret and sort them. So the first thing you want to do is write down every idea that pops into your head, no matter how ridiculous or crazy it sounds. You never know if there's an inkling of something to drive you to something else. Keep writing and let ideas build off each other. When you finally hit that dry patch and you can't think of any more ideas, go back, reread everything on your list, and cross off the crazy ideas that are just impossible. And then brainstorm again with a group of creatives. Working with creative people can give you some more insight and more information and introduce you to different processing and thinking that can direct you to a plausible solution for your problem. When you brainstorm, you want to turn off any criticism and just let ideas flow. Of course, all solutions to problems come with obstacles. And just like in everyday life, there are obstacles you need to overcome when you're trying to solve business problems. After you've gathered a list of possible solutions, prioritized them, decided which ones you're going to implement first, you want to take a look at what barriers may occur to block your path. For example, if a solution is going to cost $500,000, it might not be something that you're going to want to employ because it is financially deterred. So charts and graphs you create visualize problems not only to point out solutions, but also they let you know what kind of obstacles you might face. Using benchmarks to measure progress. A benchmark is a base number that you set ahead of time to determine whether or not a solution or strategy is successful. Benchmarks are also really, really helpful in measuring progress. So maybe you haven't made the solution yet, but you're moving towards it. It's important to know that so you can continue whatever actions you're implementing. Benchmark can involve time, how long it takes to complete something, quantity, cost, or a resolved situation. When you benchmark, you're measuring your work against a defined standard, one that you implement, your goal, where you want to go. Often benchmarks measure your progress against an outside standard, such as best practices that are idealized or represented in other organizations. So when you define standards for benchmarks, you want to use research you've gathered about a problem and identify areas that are problematic. You want to find out how others have handled the problem before in these areas, study the strategies to implement them, and then, of course, take a look periodically, immediately, whatever is important, and see what is going on that is allowing you to move forward. If you have these unintended consequences, which sometimes happen, you want to also get out of a process or solution if it's not working in the way you've intended. Benchmarks also need to be defined. If you badly define a benchmark, it might not be useful to you if somebody else is interpreting it in a way that is different from what it's intended. You don't want to generate a bunch of useless results. Types of benchmarks that are very popular include group measurements. You're measuring what your group is doing against a similar group, for example, in a sales activity. You can measure different features of another group and compare it to your own criteria. Again, with web metrics, you can just take a look at what seems to be going on with the competition as far as sales and so forth, and see if you can generate enough momentum on your website as well. So in summary and conclusion, when you create a benchmark for problem solving, you're creating a goal to measure your solution or steps against the solution. You want to create ways to compare alternate solutions against each other. Benchmarking helps you create a process where you identify best steps, and you can adapt these steps to improve your situation. Again, use the benchmarks to monitor what's going on. This is really important. What if the solution you're implementing is making your situation worse because you didn't have all the facts and information gathered? You need to backtrack then and create a new plan. Creating a visual or structured representation of data like a chart or even a list gives you a chance to group information into categories. It can be easier to find direction towards a solution when you recognize clusters and patterns in your research. Patterns aren't confined to numbers. Patterns can be images, behaviors, words, just a variety of things. Patterns and categories that are revealed as you sort your data can be a launching point where you can move to brainstorming, where creativity is generated for solutions. Although the activity can produce innovative ideas, there are good rules to follow to help you get out as many ideas as possible, as well as their possible implementation. This is Dr. Liz Musil. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on different ways to approach problems and generating solutions to problems. Thank you.